What's up?
What is up, Daddy Gang? We're back.
Yeah, we are, and we're daddier than ever.
You might notice something different about us.
I know what you're thinking.
Those two got a brand deal. Yes, we did. And we're giving away sex toys and gift cards to Balesa. Yeehaw! Hope that gets approved.
Tanner, is that a banana in your pocket? Or are you just excited about... Wait, never mind, we already introduced the brand deal. What's the new punchline?
Tanner, is that a banana in your pocket or are you just excited about the brand deal?
Both. As a demisexual, the demi wand has just got me all kinds of excited these days.
You're not a demisexual.
I'm only attracted to demigods, and that is true.
The cases having chargers in them. Genius.
That is because I was like, right before I was like, oh, I forgot to charge these, and Samantha was like, Tana, they come in a charge box, and I was like, what?
Fucking idiot over here.
For any gay men who may be watching this, yes, this is exactly what a vagina looks like. This is really pretty and honestly the softest material. That is wonderful.
I think we should just do a brand deal right here, right now.
Walgreens brand shit. This is so nice.
Oh, you have Walgreens sex toys?
Worse. Off-green Walgreens.
Oh my God,
Off-brand Walgreens.
You seem way too good at sex to have Walgreens sex toys, based on what I've heard from being your roommate and friend of all your partners. Basically, we're doing a giveaway, thanks to Balesa, obviously, where if you click the giveaway link, which is in our description box, everyone who clicks that link and signs up gets either a free sex toy or a gift card. So it's like, it's win-win. We love a giveaway where the dopamine is guaranteed. Because I don't like to get anticipatory dopamine for the vacation. I've convinced myself I'm going to win despite my 1 in a million odds, and then that not happening.
No.
Side note, my parents won a vacation when I was 12. I've probably told you this story before.
To where?
But they'd already split up, and so we had to go on the vacation, the three of us.
You did it?
After they split up.
They did it?
Yeah, I know. And like, my dad was already with my stepmom, super awkward.
No, what?
Core trauma.
Wait, why would they do that?
They won it, it was free. You can't just not go on a free vacation.
You like pay, you're like, hey, listen, I'll give you $500.
Well, yeah, I know, right?
If the relationship works to a degree,
Yeah,
if they're
no.
able to do that healthily, sure.
No, they weren't. I don't know.
Yeah,
Divorces
okay,
are weird.
yeah.
Can we please get back to the brand deal? I don't want to be creating any...
Let's mix more of your parents' divorce into all of this.
So you may have seen Balesa on other creators' channels. I feel like they've just been brand dealing up a storm, which we love to see. Girl bosses. And they are girl bosses because it's a women-owned company.
As aspiring girl boss business babes, we really...
This was perfect. I mean, talk about brand integration. Seamless. The synergy of it all. Their mission is to empower everyone to embrace, explore, and celebrate their sexuality. Dare I say we've accidentally got the exact same mission. Except we're also annoying. Let's start with the hyper-realistic replica of a woman's vagina, the pebble.
If I were a penguin, I would give this to my lover penguin.
It's giving Barbie core. It's given Helen Mirren. It's given the speech in the Barbie movie where Amanda Ferreira took 3 days to talk about the contradictory things a woman has to try and fulfill. So the pebble has both suction and vibration. They're controlled independently. It's ergonomically built to fit perfectly in your hand, as you can see. And there's no annoying pattern modes, which I think is a fun feature.
I always hate the pattern modes.
Yeah, I don't want to go through 12 patterns.
No, I'm not like on an elliptical. It's not like a thing where you're just like...
This is the Air Vibe. It has dual stimulation, so both G-spot and clitoris.
If your sex has been hit or miss, this will take you to clitor bliss. Something
That's
in there?
free copywriting, Melissa. This one also comes in fun, discreet casing, as does this, and it's waterproof, which is important. It's also rechargeable, as with all of them, and very silent, which also just a fun bonus feature that you don't always get. The wand works for all body types because orgasms are for everyone.
Not just for women anymore. Men can have them too.
This one is also very quiet, and as you can see, fun, innovative design. I really like the color on that one.
I really do too. This just makes me happier just looking at it.
We've come such a long way from, like, you know, there's like massive vibrators that were popular in the past.
Totally. You can't be like, you know, a like mechanical baseball bat. Like,
That's basically, yeah. It has a flexible neck. Oh, show us the flexible neck, Tana.
okay.
Finally, the one that has my favorite name, the Thump. This is a toy that does it all. It vibrates, sucks, and pumps.
It sucks in a good way.
Yeah, party rockers are in the house tonight, and they go by the name of Thump, and you don't want to look them in the eye.
They are tub thumping. They get knocked down, but they get up again. The cum start coming, and they don't stop coming.
How are we going to get this brand deal approved?
They like watched at least one.
We are under contract, under oath. This utilizes Balessa's improved pleasure jet technology. It has true fill vibrations that naturally complement the suction at its targeted base. And the innovative Thump technology gives natural clitoral palpitations on the back of the pop grip, made from premium quality silicone. And this is the point where you click our giveaway link and go get either a gift card or a free toy from Balessa.
How fun! I'm a believer.
Did you guys enjoy our brand deal? Let's get into purity culture now. It's funny that we're talking about purity culture today because right before we started filming this video today, as I was getting ready for the day, I was listening to John DeLynne's new episode. Shh.
Sorry. This is chaos ASMR. When you need to court a little chaos, but don't want to like
Totally.
open a new credit card.
So I was watching John DeLynne's Mormon Stories podcast where he was talking about the Jody Hildebrandt situation, which we've already covered. Bernie, if you could just majorly chill for the rest of this video.
He's ASMRing hard.
And in the video, John was basically explaining how the purity culture that is inherent to Mormonism is what allowed Jody Hildebrandt to rise to that level of power within the Mormon system and have that much ability to control people. And it was all just very interesting. And I feel like purity culture has been coming up a lot for us in videos lately. Even beyond sex, I feel like we've been talking a lot about just how the concept of purity in general can be so harmful because it almost encourages this, I think, delusional belief that you can just uproot everything that's bad about you and just become like perfectly good and pure. But because that isn't how human beings work or how the psyche works, all you're really doing is repressing the parts of yourself you don't like or feel shame about, and then they're more likely to come out in dysfunctional ways because you've just obscured them. So it's not really real that you can become pure, you know, like get rid of everything, I don't know, every sort of dangerous impulse about you or every, you know, just anything that someone could see as bad. Like, that's just not possible. And we know from psychology that a lot of the time, the more we try not to think about certain things, the more they'll come up, or the more that we try to repress parts of ourselves, the more that will have other unintended consequences. So I just think purity culture, even beyond just sex, although I know that people are referring to like stuff around sexuality, I guess, when they say purity culture, but just like purity as a concept is so dangerous in an even bigger reason than I think sometimes gets talked about, because we talk a lot about purity culture in the ex-Mormon space, but then you'll hear people be like, but the Mormon church still teaches good values, and I'm like, but I don't really agree with that, because like the whole style is through that lens that I just think is fundamentally like wrong and harmful. Like I believe in like teaching people ethics and to, you know, serve others and be honest. I mean, all things you could argue that Mormonism as an institution doesn't practice anyway, but I just think you have to do it through a different method than by encouraging this thing of purity that isn't real. You say things now.
Well, very well said. And adding to that, like, if you're starting off wrong, you're never going to be like doing the wrong thing the right way. And that's kind of what gets confused. It's like, oh, but it's like very pro, you know, this is a good value. And I'm like, I don't actually believe that. Now, I think that there is a conversation that needs to be had as religion and purity culture generally as a response to the other side of the pendulum, which is like absolute permissiveness.
Sure.
Like, you know, we talking about Russell Brand was sort of a break from the area that we're normally focused on, which is the purity. But then there's also that side that's not at all concerned with purity. That's just like follow every impulse, satiate every desire. It used people as objects of gratification.
This is why consent really is the next evolution of our species' thoughts about sex, because it's like we probably had this sense that like, oh, our natural instincts make us do crazy things and like we can barely control ourselves and that really scares us, so we lean into like, we'll really clamp down on this instinct and just try to squash it. But really it's like, what was causing harm about that, you know, like unfettered expression of sexuality, the way that your brain's telling you to do it, was that it just wasn't taking into account like harm to others, you know. It was, so it's almost like the harm to others got mixed up in, you know, it's perfectly fine to like act on your sexual, you know, to express your sexuality and to engage with it and have it be like a big part of your life if you want it to be. But that's why consent is like so, because I feel like humans do that pendulum thing, and you can see why purity, I mean there's other reasons purity culture came about, like I guess we could get into that, but just as a general control tool for human beings, it's perfect.
I was gonna say that the history of it is steeped in like I mean the idea of like virginity being this conceptual like purity thing, that like you're truly righteous and then after sex you're somehow dirty, or your value as a woman a sex object in a patriarchal cultural objectification of women. Like it's just very easy to see how then like that culture becomes so obsessed with like virgin fetishism and so much abuse of children that then they project outward onto gay people who, oh, they're open about their sexuality, they want to talk about consent, they want kids to be able to consent. And it's like, no, they want everybody to have the ability to understand, to have power over their own sexuality, which is important. You have to claim your own sexual power. Even if that means like being asexual, like to own that and to claim it and to like, that's only you can define that. And it's not something that you, like our culture just hands to you. It's something you have to consciously do. And because we're coming out of this system that's fully based on objectification, that's not based in ideas of consent, that's, you know, not seeing people as fully human.
It seems like the disconnect right now between sort of people who have more conservative mindsets around sex, you know, more purity culture focused ones, and, you know, those of us who are pro sexual expression and pro LGBTQ plus rights and all that, is that, well, the conservative sort of thinkers are coming at it thinking, again, because sexuality has been something they've felt they have to squash in themselves for fear of it just being this big terrifying force. They don't understand that it's like it's the shame and it's seeing it as that big scary thing that makes it more of a dangerous force a lot of the time. Whereas if you are like healthily expressing your sexuality with consent at the center of that, which that's another thing. I mean, we've heard conservatives, I'm just going to use conservatives as like the label for this, but this may not apply to everyone. I mean, in conservative and like they have a conservative mindset on sex, so it doesn't. I'm not being necessarily political in that. Anyway, it's just frustrating because it seems like so much conservative discourse, as you mentioned, like they're vilifying LGBTQ people as if just the fact that someone is sort of embodied in their sexuality and open about it and feels no shame inherently means that they must be predatory. We have a long way to go in terms of like what consent is being mainstream, which sounds crazy to say in 2023. But I mean, we hear conservative people on like Fox News or whatever talking about how the left wants to make it so that kids can consent, and I'm like, that's never been a part of any kind of definition of consent I've ever heard. That is like the exact opposite of what everyone on the left, if you need to call it that, is saying. But how has that become a dominant line of thinking in conservative circles? Like stuff like that worries me, like just the way the discourse gets warped, and it's like, how are we, what's our plan here? I don't know if there is one, but it's tough because if you're from a community that has made you terrified of sexuality as a force, then you are going to feel scared when you see it in others, and your own fear is going to distort something healthy and natural into something scary. You know, that's the only lens you have, is sexuality is scary. And so you're associating perfectly normal, healthy things like people being gay and happy about it with scary things with no evidence. I mean, that's humans, right? It's like, if you're scared, you're gonna sense a threat that is not there.
Yeah. Now, this is a particularly bad Mormon doctrine, though I'm sure a lot of evangelicals, Catholics, and other puritanical types can appreciate or, you know, have some solidarity with the levels of guilt that are heaped upon you about sex, because it is like part of our energetic being and part of our like spiritual and connective relationshiping with the world. Again, this, like, even if that is asexuality, there's still like that will affect the way that you're relating and interfacing with the world. Anyway, the way that, again, Mormonism particularly heaps it all together, like right up there with murder, like you said, and doesn't differentiate, because consent isn't part of the conversation. It's, you know, the prophet says he's going to take you as a wife, and you say yes, or y'all get destroyed by an angel with a sword. There's not really consent there.
And honestly, a lot of religious leaders outside of sexual abuse, like high control groups, run on a lack of understanding about consent and boundaries. Yes. Like, so no wonder those are the groups that tend to demonize the idea of consent, or just create a complete straw man to attack it. Because it is genuinely threatening to those ideas. And even if people aren't conscious of that, that's affecting the ways that they're able to understand it.
This is something I have had to like work through, because I didn't grow up with any like genuinely positive conversations about sex. Like, at one point we had like a Sunday school where the bishop came in and was like, boys' sexuality, I don't even know if he said sex. It's like, you know, in marital relationships, men are like a flashlight. Women are like an iron. They have to be heated up, whereas a man will take, you know.
Very come
and that
as you
was
are.
my sex talk. And it's the same with substances and other things, that like when everything is any deviation from the will of God is worthy of sending you to hell, and it's only the grace of Christ that redeems you from any sin. But, you know, it's all bad and it's all evil, and it's all right up there with murder. You know, and it's so easy to see how men, especially predominantly coming out of patriarchal cultures who have not ever had to like check any of that or reckon with any of that, don't even have the tools to conceptualize. I didn't have the tools coming out of religion and just being like a newborn atheist with like, I'm like feeling brand new here. I have no idea what's really going on in the world, because I've been living this fantasy. And so I've heard this about a lot of ex-Mormon men, that it's like very easy. Like there's this assumption that like, people in the world are just out having sex all the time. Like, if you're either like a Puritan like me, or that you're just like, you're just out fucking, you know, everybody and having a wild time. And you kind of I went into like social situations feeling like that would be the thing, but also like knowing nothing, you know. And
I think it's because Mormons, in our experience, are thinking about sex way more than the people that are actually having sex.
Right.
Because again, if you're like, don't think about a white elephant, you're going to think about a white elephant all day. And then if
the white elephant is going to be a looming demon that's like pawing you down all the time.
So no wonder you thought that, because you only knew like an extreme on your end, so you assumed it would be like the reverse, when it's like, no, you were the one that was hyperfixated on sex. But then a lot of the time religious people will be like, oh, cat fight.
Whoa.
Jack, break it up for them. Jack's just like, what the fuck? Bernie, why are you on one today?
I kind of used to naively assume that people who left the church, who could sort of understand some of the paradoxes and contradictions and be able to be like, okay, I need to keep growing past that kind of mentality, would inevitably question the way that the church impacted their sexuality, their gender relationship, and identity. Not even just to be like, everybody's, non-binary or whatever, but like the way that they as a man or a woman interacts with men and women, and a host of other things, politics and all that, but some people don't. And
some people don't. I feel like there's a lot of, I've talked about this before, but I've had so many women say that ex-woman men suck. Because, I mean...
And it makes sense, because
yeah.
they've literally, a lot of them probably likely have not had, like, really informative or healthy conversations
and I think
around sex.
A lot of ex-Mormons do re-educate themselves, and that's really good. But there's a lot to re-educate yourself on after leaving Mormonism, and the timeline is just going to be what it's going to be for people learning that stuff. So, yeah. Yeah,
I mean, like, I can't remember ever, like, the word consent wasn't even on my radar leaving that. Like, do you ever hear that word in Mormonism?
In Mormonism, no.
Because you're taught consent is when you say yes at the altar in the temple on your wedding day, and then after that, like, you're married and everything goes, unless you're like in the 70s and they're like, no blowjobs, no sex toys, no.
Yeah.
So it's been a process for me learning, and I feel like, I've always been like a tender person, and like I like to genuinely connect with people, but like certainly have had to learn better and have had to go back to and be like, hey, I'm so sorry. And I don't claim to be like a perfect person. Like I'm still like ghost people and, just like dumb shit like that, where it's not even like out of spite. It's just like life just keeps happening and you're like, well, but it's like an ongoing process of learning how to like, first of all, unshame your own internal experience and be like, we've talked about this in other episodes, like, what am I working with here? Like, what do I like? What feels good for me? What do I desire? And how do I, in relationshiping in any type, understand that about somebody else so that I'm not projecting my desires onto them and then operating with them, but it's more of a consensual negotiation. It's probably too sterile a word, but like a negotiation about what your mutual desires, interests, boundaries are, so that you can both have a fulfilling experience, however long or intense or intimate that is. Part of unshaming too is like realizing that like sex is, and human connection generally is just messy business across the board. Yeah. And it's not always going to be navigated like perfectly or happily, like but it's just a matter of like maintaining accountability and again, understanding your own self and expressing that when it needs to be expressed and being willing and soliciting that in return so that you can understand.
Here's a question I have, because you were like in purity culture your whole adolescent development. Like, obviously you can unlearn and re-educate yourself after you leave that, but are there ways you still notice that being with you? And do you have any advice, I guess, for other people who are maybe like earlier on in that process? Like, how do you, and this is kind of a genuine question, because though I was Mormon, I didn't really grow up in purity culture. Like, how do you like uproot purity culture? Because I imagine there's got to be, I know with just like things from my development generally, like it is hard if you learn something at a critical period of development and that's what your body feels is true. Mm-hmm. That's hard to change. Maybe you don't have all the answers, but just your thoughts.
For me, it's been like, again, claiming my sexual power, stepping into that, understanding my own body, and delighting in my own pleasure, which is forbidden. Like, even, low-key Mormon marriages, that messaging even comes into that of like, yes, sex is wonderful and special, but don't enjoy it too much. Don't get like caught up in the animalism of the whole experience.
Keep Christ in the bedroom.
Exactly.
There's a new Trinity in town, okay? You don't need those guys. The triangle is the strongest shape, but not like that. God, not like that.
So for me, being polyamorous was like, even if I'm not always like practicing polyamory, if that makes
that man with a blonde mohawk and mesh top is polyamorous.
you know, like, big surprise to no one. You know, that acknowledgement is essentially just that. It's like, hey, as part of my base makeup, I'm just like acknowledging that the reality that I am going to be attracted to people. Like, even if I'm in a relationship with one person who I'm delighted with and spend most of my time with, I'm going to be attracted to other people. Mm-hmm. And in religion, I wasn't even aware, like, that was only framed in evil.
Evil, selfish,
and
unloving.
And yet how many Mormon couples have affairs because they are attracted to other people? That energy is always, like, seeking connection. And
I imagine, like, not knowing, for example, like any sex and relationship therapist will tell you it's perfectly normal and healthy to be attracted to other people, even if you're madly in love with your spouse.
Right.
But I imagine not knowing that as a Mormon would make it so that when you do feel that, it creates such a turmoil on you. And so then you're almost giving that more of a platform than it needs to have. And again, it's the white elephant, you're thinking about it more. And they project everything, this is why when you try to repress things, they just become a bigger deal. Instead of being like, oh yeah, that's normal, that's supposed to happen, just move on with your day, nothing to worry about.
Right.
But if you're like, oh, this is huge, and like, you know, and then it's like...
Well, and they project it onto other people. Oh, this you know, young girl is wearing a tank top, trying to tempt me to get me to cheat on my wife. And it's like, that is not anybody's problem. This is you making your hang up everybody else's problem. Yeah, just that which you resist persists. And so coming out of that, and you know, I'm not saying like everybody has to be polyamorous or... you know, anything like that.
He's saying everybody has to be polyamorous.
You heard it here first, folks. But for me, that was just like this is just me being honest and authentic about that. And so any person I'm getting in relationship automatically upfront knows that about me. And it's not even like, oh, now I know this, that you're like wrestling, you wrestle with same-sex attraction and you wrestle with polyamory temptation. It's like, no, I've just found people who are also like queer and polyamorous, mm-hmm. who orient in a similar way, and then the relationship just flows naturally, and it doesn't feel as like in religion my sexuality was like so
in a not fun chokehold,
and now it's in a sensual dom reciprocal bottom. You know, it's good. It's like just free flowing, mm-hmm. and it's just nice because it's not like a scary thing. It's just able to be what it is. Mm-hmm. And it's so scary how much religion and culture gets people in these weird mental conceptual hang-ups that just like totally distance you from the lived experience of like being a human in this monkey suit. It's wild.
Also, I feel like once you embrace sexuality without shame more, you can allow for it to be a force in your life that sort of ebbs and flows, and it has its seasons, as with every single part of humanity, like generally. But purity culture is like, it's not like that. It's like it blocks the flow of the life.
Winter all year round.
For ages, it's like a dam, and then like the dam breaks because you're married, and then that's going to be a whole like different experience. And it's not in line with the way humans are. I mean, it's kind of like how throughout the month, like your appetite for food will go up and down depending on your hormones. I think especially if you're a woman. Or especially if you have a menstrual cycle.
Especially if you're taking maca powder in your protein shakes.
Does it make you more hungry? Less hungry?
More horny.
Oh, horny. The maca powder.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. So, okay, so I was originally asking you, like, what about, like, uprooting purity culture from yourself? It seems to me like a big... I mean, with any, like, wanting to create, you know, new ways of relating to the world and, like, your kind of like changing your nervous system's reactions to things, and basically just like creating change within your psyche, it's often good to like anchor the new belief you want to have in like a tangible action you can take. So that, I think, is why a lot of ex-Mormons like really enjoy experimenting with like doing boudoir photo shoots or dressing more immodestly. Like, you don't have to do those things, but they can be, for a lot of people, a way to shed shame, because you're literally doing a thing that your brain has told you for ages meant one thing, realizing it doesn't mean, that you're giving your brain an actual tangible experience to create new neural pathways, I think. And that just seems useful. So, because I think sometimes you see certain people leave the church and really lean in, like suddenly it's all their Instagram content is like underwear stuff. And I'm like, I get it. That makes sense.
Am I being subtweeted right now?
No, lean in harder, King. You are not capitalizing enough. I guess what I'm saying is just we should all have a lot of non-judgment for how people, because like life is often a pendulum swing, and sometimes you need, if you've been like so repressed for so long, you need kind of a period of, dare I say, like hypersexuality, all consensual, and like look after yourself and be all that.
Need or may desire.
Yeah, sure, but like your psyche just seeks it, and so and that's okay. That can be like, and then but that doesn't mean you'll be like that forever. You've been like, so from my perspective, sexually liberated for like many years now, and I know it's like always an unfolding thing with like sexuality, gender, and all that. But do you feel pretty gone from purity culture at this point? Like, do you feel like it? Obviously, you still have that as your history, but does it ever impact you anymore?
I think it does, and it's hard to know where like the purity culture ends and like this just like biological paranoia that I think we, especially humans, feel, which is just like, there's an impulse in us that feels evolutionary in nature, that like to be on the alert for danger. And in the modern world, here in Utah, where like physical danger isn't so much a problem, it's very easy to get like have that impulse be directed to other things of like being hypercritical about like performance in social situations, about insecurities we may have about anything, sex, our bodies, relationships, our status, our wealth, blah 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 blah. And we can, again, I think there's probably some of that in a lot of us, whether you were raised religious or not, that just like guilt or it can at least be turned into guilt, that impulse,
or just
and then there
distrust.
or like an alertness that can be self-directed, and it definitely is exacerbated by religion and puritanical thinking to be like this like hyper vigilant, God is watching my thoughts, like I'm gonna be in trouble, isn't that it, like I'm in trouble, I've done something wrong, and so for the most part, I felt like actually pretty quickly, psychedelics were very helpful for me. They're not for everybody, but for me, they really psychedelic means mind manifesting, right? Like it shows you what's on your mind, and very quick it was like, this is a big part of your human experience that has just been like squashed down, and it very quickly surfaced. And I was like, whoa, okay, I need to like reckon. And then it was just a process after that of just observing myself versus like trying to cram myself into somebody else's box. And it, like I said, it didn't feel like that took too long and to feel just like comfortable and more like aware, but that like sense of fear of like doing something wrong is like lingers with me. And like my first Grindr hookup, the guy was like, wow, I've never heard someone ask so many questions, because I was just like, are you okay with this? Like, can I do this? And it's like, usually they just go for it. And I was like, I guess, and I'm sure, there is probably, there's a space for that. I don't want, like, sometimes you do just kind of know with somebody, and you see it in each other's eyes, and you go for the kiss.
It's good to lean more on explicit verbal consent before you're like feel confident that you can like accurately discern people's, right. There's like physical ways people show consent. Yeah, especially like Grindr, where you're like meeting someone you're gonna have sex with, like in like you're like, hey, wait, really quick. This is like being on a date and having more time to like get a feel for somebody, and which is Grindr is a little tough. I think had too many situations where it's like, now you're just in my house. Here we are.
Okay.
tough.
Yeah, but just like gauging enthusiasm generally, like
and whether the escalation is mutual, like if one person is escalating.
So someone on Instagram, when we posed the question about purity culture, said that like, you know, the de facto in their experience growing up was like male privilege, power, all that, and then in deconstructing purity culture since then and uprooting it, there has been this new awareness that like even the new form has been, it's like, okay, they left Mormonism and then they started dating people at 26 or something, feeling like way behind everybody else. Like, I'm brand new here, I have no idea what's going on. And then their views of sex being formed by the people that they dated. And then now having to be like, even separate from that of like, what do I want? What is like, when it's not a man, when it's not me making a man feel good and then I'm feeling good about myself, it's what do I actually want out of a situation. And I think a lot of femme people in my experience, or you know, people have told me like, I just do this because I've never thought not to. It just feels like what's expected of me versus what, and that's not necessarily wrong, but it's something to note, I think, and to be like, maybe have that question of like, what do I actually want?
I've said this a million times, but it is like so hard for women leaving high control groups to even, they are genuinely often not in the habit in any arena of life really of asking themselves what they want. So it sounds so simple, like just start thinking about what you want. But it's like they with sex, they may not even know where to begin. And I think something we've sort of seen play out weirdly with Bethany from Girl Defined is now that she's married and trying to kind of like take control of her sexuality in these new ways, you can tell that she's kind of swung the other way in that now I would imagine she feels this pressure now to be this like multi-orgasmic woman selling sex courses, and you know she's like realizing like
is she doing a Balesa brand deal?
She's realized that the repression was bad, but it's almost my perception is that she puts this new pressure on herself, and I think that's definitely something I've like observed as well in like deconstruction spaces that I had to get over, was that there's almost pressure to become so sexual to prove that you're, you know, free, but then it's also like everyone's sexuality is different. And sometimes like for women, I think an important first step in figuring out what they want is just the most basic thing of like figuring out, do I yes or no want to have sex? Like even that is like a huge like thing to address before they can even get into like the specifics of what they want. Like I feel like it can be a longer journey sometimes for women. I know that this is a thing that people, you know, you don't just get over it because you leave the church. I think the dominant view in Mormonism is people leave and then they just start having sex all the time and it makes them fake happy. And that's kind of the end of it. Like they have no concept of like the amount of inner work that goes into all of that, you know?
Mm-hmm. Someone said, I left like 10 years ago and still feel so much shame around my body and sex. That's so sad.
That's another thing, the way that Mormonism repressing sexuality also, in addition to other things that do this, encourages people to be disconnected from their own bodies, which, I mean, yeah, that's a whole other barrier. I think, dare I say, especially women, because I mean, there's been like a heavy like diet culture and focus on like female beauty in a way that there hasn't been for men in Mormonism. Like women are supposed to exist to be like pretty compliant objects to men.
Pretty, but not too pretty. Naturally, but you know, not frumpy.
Like a stone cold fox, but you could bring her home to your mom. But yeah, like women being taught to like deny their own hunger and fullness cues. And, you know, that goes hand in hand with just denying your sexual impulses as well.
Also to view just the body like
as an enemy.
Not just even just like inconvenient or something,
and
but just like actively working against you.
The natural man is an enemy to God. I think
turning you against it, creating a civil war in yourself.
That's kind of like purity culture in a nutshell.
Someone said, yes, still feel strange on and off about masturbation, living with my partner. Sex is still something that will seem dirty/impure in my mind. When I dated a few women, I would have to totally recorrect my brain often when it told me I was being sinful. Just lots of ingrained ideas about purity that I still have to remind myself aren't true. It's been 6 years.
It really is wild how much of a cornerstone purity culture is to Mormonism and other groups like it, and just how wild it is that it's taught as the sin next to murder. John, in his Mormon Stories episode, was going through all those quotes of like any true Latter-day Saint parent would rather their kid come home in a body bag than impure. I'm like, God, no wonder ex-Mormons struggle 10 years later. Like, that's some deep shit to be told that you're almost a murderer as this force in you is developing.
I get like mentally kind of, my family, we get along really well and stuff, but obvious, like knowing the messaging that I was brought up with and the cultural climate I was brought up in, knowing the life that I live now, which is really wholesome.
Yeah.
I may be a slut, but I am a wholesome slut, having just like a genuinely sweetheart time.
I'm
like
a mouse in a jean jacket. A lot of people claim to be a mouse in a jean jacket in an unwarranted way, in my opinion.
Well, thank you. And so like the disparity between what I know, the messaging they're getting in versus my actual lived experience and knowing the way that that's getting projected onto me makes me so sad. And also then like gets in my head of like, oh, well, I don't want to like create weird tension for myself. Like, you know, if I dress a certain way or bring a certain person home or bring a certain person up, it's going to cause this like frictional dynamic to an already kind of difficult relationship, even though mine is relatively good. Of course, there's like Mormon families who like a kid comes out as gay and you're out of the house, we're never speaking again. We know them and it just sucks. So I'm grateful, but like at the same time, it's like, it sucks that I even have to like run those calculations of it. Like, is it worth wearing this or doing this or blah, 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 if I could just like get by and not have to have like a tough conversation, you know? And it sucks that it has to be that way, but it's just like one of those, like, it's my karma, if you will.
That's something I really feel with like modesty post-Mormonism is like, sometimes I want to wear a thing because it's hot or for whatever reason, but I know that like it's gonna create a certain like impression or reaction in certain like men at the grocery store. And I'm like, I know that that's not like my problem and I don't have to take it on, but the fact of the matter is like I will be like seeing it or thinking of it and it's just like not worth it for me. And I think that's valid, you know, that you just it sometimes it's like you want to do the liberated thing, but because you know that other people are like gonna be weird about it, it's just like not really like worth it to you. That's kind of just a sad reality I think about being a woman is like, yeah, it shouldn't matter what I wear, but like it does. And so sometimes you know, sometimes I'm in more of a defiant mood and I'm like, fuck that, I don't care. But it's really reasonable for women to care and to just not want to be thought of that way. Or, you know, like if we lived in a world where men were genuinely all respectful, then it wouldn't be something to worry about.
Right.
But because we don't, ugh.
And the sort of, go ahead.
Well, I think that's where there is, you know, the whole, like, dads don't want their daughters going out dressed like that. There is kind of there's something, like, beautiful in there, even though it's, like, all wrapped up in this, like, very heinous culture. I think it, a lot of the time, is well-intentioned because, you know, men know that what men are like, and they can't bear the thought of their daughter, but... So it's such a tough one to navigate. Sorry if this is a bit of a tangent, but it's just like I can understand like why dads would want to tell their daughters not to wear that, but then I also believe in the daughter's right to wear that. Yeah, I guess that's another one of those like just the impossible things women have to juggle, where it's like both are valid, really, but it's just there's always a trade-off with being empowered.
Yeah, when someone in downtown Salt Lake yelled faggot at me from a truck, I definitely thought about like what I wore for a long time after that. I'm like, whoa, somebody like it like went out of their way to like make me feel scared
like an
for wearing
of,
clothes they didn't like
yeah, and
that's so scary.
The fact that their violence was able to like click in with what you were doing, that's what's so scary. Is it's like it's not your fault, but like people are walking around with these unexpressed feelings looking for something to project them onto, and it's very scary to think that you could become you know, like the object of
the downflow of patriarchal purity culture.
Just an analogy that's in my mind right now is people that have been steeped in diet culture, like the idea that they have to like really restrict like themselves from certain foods or amounts of foods or whatever, and that they like can't trust their body's natural hunger and fullness cues. They imagine that if they let go of all their diet rules, they would just binge and binge and binge, and they wouldn't be able to trust themselves with food. When really, that might happen initially at the beginning as a response to the restriction, but our bodies, like, they know what to do. They know how to, like, feed us the right, you know, they have, again, hunger and fullness cues are, like, built in. Mm-hmm. And it's the fact that people have become disconnected from their hunger and fullness cues that creates this, you know, potentially like really massively fluctuating relationship with like their weight and food, and it just becomes this big source of stress to them. So they imagine themselves with no rules, and that just seems so scary. Mm-hmm. But for the people that don't have any rules, it's like not even really a thing, because again, like the body knows what to do. And I think it's the exact same with sexuality. Like once you understand consent and, you know, once you get like the sex education you need to get to like be safe with sex, it's not that thing of people in purity culture imagine like, oh, well, if I didn't have any of these rules, I'd be crazy. Mm. What was it?
But their idea of crazy.
Yeah, well, they probably, like you said, you thought people were just having sex all the time, because like you would think that, because that's what you imagine you would be, because
that was the temptation that I was like avoiding, is like, because it seemed like this constant like whoa, and if I just gave into that, I'd be like
and you don't realize that like the rules and the restriction are what is creating that. You think the rules and restrictions are what's like barely keeping a lid on this like massive terrifying power. That's just not true. That's the delusion of it all.
Yeah, and I will say, like, one of the first like fissures in the dam of holding back the facts, you know, in my testimony, was in a priesthood meeting where they were talking about like, or a Sunday school meeting where they were saying at a YSA ward, a young single adult ward, saying, you know, women, you're responsible for the men, like you got to be thinking about. And I was like, that's not on them, like. It never felt like, for me,
this
like...
This is why you're a good woman.
like, oh, if a woman does this thing, I can't help. I was always like, that's like making me out to be like like you're insinuating that we're all just like a bunch of monsters who can't like help ourselves. And that's not true. Like, I don't feel that way. And that was one of the first things that I was like, this is like a message that does not resonate with me. Of course, that'll get you in trouble in that kind of system.
I guess our takeaway message from this video is unshame everything and click our giveaway link.
Balesa. Also, hop on over to Patreon where we're reading about Stephanie.
A great example of how restriction and shame creates a problem that probably wouldn't have been there otherwise, as shown through 80s Mormon fiction by Jack Bayland.
If on one end we have absolute permissiveness, and people can see, you know, people in the Puritan camp sector can see that there's this level of permissiveness, and they feel like, well, if I give in once, that'll start me on this road. What's the trick to staying in the middle way, the sweet spot?
Yeah, but I think you're viewing permissiveness at that, like...
consent is the...
Yeah, so that's the... Permissiveness should only ever mean consensual permissiveness. Yes. And, like...
Because if someone wants to have sex 10 times a day, as long as they're being like upfront about that.
It's like if someone wants to have 10 Twinkies a day, like it's not my business. Like it might be good to not have 10 Twinkies a day, but like there's no need for me to like really be judging anyone for that or involved in that. You know, we've all got our stuff. It's just about like honoring what you are and and you know, there might be situations where for whatever reason you feel like I don't know, taking a break from having sex with new people for a period of time might be good. You know, you can still within that, you know, there's periods of time where you might be like, I should eat more protein. Like I've been working out a lot. It might be good for me to like be a bit more structured in that. You can still apply that mindset to your sex life. And, you know, if you feel like you've been having a lot of a certain type of experiences and you want to invite a different, you know, you can have control within that. It's not like you have to just indulge your every whim, but it's like, by allowing yourself to take stock of all your desires without shame, you can then decide within that, like, which ones are actually like worth acting on. Because sometimes we have like a fleeting desire. Like sometimes I want to have a glass of wine on a given day, but I know that, and like there's no shame if I do, but I just know that like I'm going to probably feel better tomorrow if I don't have a glass of wine. So it's not about this like rampant hedonistic indulgence with like no thought to how it might impact you. Yeah.
And there's a lot of ways that the shame cycle creates compulsion.
Yeah. For example, I just keep talking about diet culture. I'm just like, I listen to a maintenance phase every week. And it feels like a good, because like food is arguably more like, we need food for survival, but they both are just these like primary biological instincts that, where we have these like self-regulating systems around in many ways. So it feels like a useful comparison. But if you like deny yourself a specific food, you will think about that food all the time. Versus if you're just like, I know that drinking alcohol doesn't really make me feel good the next day, so I'm going to be like kind of mindful about when it's worth it. That's how
I love, like, I mean, I feel like I drink. It's fun being an ex-Mormon who drinks, and for that reason is like a total heathen, knowing that I drink less than Joseph Smith and probably Jesus too.
You're not a big drinker.
Because I'm like, I kind of have that same way of like, that could be nice, but I know it'll be really nice if I save it for like a special occasion,
Yeah, and there is something.
And then it's like a playful energy versus that like uptight, paranoid.
Yeah. I think having an amount of discipline in all areas of life can be useful, but like it can't be discipline that you build through shame. That's not.
Yeah.
It's just got to be like feeling in control of your body enough to whatever, but also recognizing when exerting control might be a bad thing. Yeah, it's all a delicate dance. That's the thing. I feel like so much stuff like all this it's so nuanced, but you can see like the human tendency to just create these polarities. Like you're either like a rampant hedonist predator or you're like only having sex until marriage, and it's like,
or a monk.
That's not what the two ends are,
That's one of the problems I have with institutional Buddhism is they claim to be the middle way, but then advocate for monk celibacy, and I'm like, what's middle way about that?
No, I don't understand monks as a Buddhist. I'm like, it feels.
No, that's where like the philosophy, the religion of Buddhism diverts from, I think, the philosophy. But that's neither here nor
crazy
there.
that happened with an ideology.
Great.
Thanks you all for being here. I look forward to reading your comments. I feel like this will be a good one. And I always learn something new in the comment section. Like genuinely, not trying to just pound it right now. I just feel like our comment section lately has been so good. Like I'm learning things. The ways that people will correct us lately, I've felt have been like very respectful and like genuinely useful. And so I'm just grateful for you guys.
Yeah, I'm always love when people add clarification. Anytime someone's like, you need to think, I'm like,
yeah,
totally. I agree.
Especially when you're shooting the shit every week on like often quite serious topics. Like there's definitely going to be times where you just kind of speak. You don't get time to really think about your thoughts about every single thing we might mention on the, sometimes the saying of it and then getting the feedback is what then informs your belief to be better. So like, don't ever think that we're saying anything too finally.
Yeah, I sometimes get scared like of semantical issues, and I try to like anticipate it and then get so hung up in like anticipating a semantical thing that I'm saying
it right now, we're both hypocrites, and we always will be, and everyone is.
Yeah, and I always have been, always will be.
I guess going back to like my original thought I had about purity, I just think it's good to acknowledge that we are all paradoxical. And that is kind of antithetical to the concept of purity, which again is the idea that you can like uproot everything bad. But the truth is that we contain good and when we can acknowledge paradox, because like if we can acknowledge that we contain multitudes like that, then there's no inner war that we're creating that doesn't need to exist, that has a lot of knock-on effects that are bad. Instead, we can just think more thoughtfully about like what wolf do I want to feed today? Genuinely.
Yeah. So well said.
Probably the wolf that wants a thump. A good thumping.
Ow! All right.
Come to Patreon. Love you guys.
Check out our merch store. Send us money.
Yeah, and like tag us in what you get from the Balasa giveaway, because I'm just so excited about us having a brand deal and it being a fun one.
All right. Love you. Bye.
Boy.